Hey, dear friends, welcome to the East Forest podcast with East Forest. I am East Forest. I have returned from the Australia tour. I am alive, and this week we're bringing you basically, I want to tell you about it. I mean, I have actually lots of amazing podcast interviews and meditations and the like to be diving into soon and sharing with you. I've actually, back-ended a lot of the scheduling of it. Well, with front-ending, I don't know. It's like now. So I feel like every day this week I'm recording a great podcast. So I'm eager to share those with you soon. But today we got another good one. This one's just talking with my partner, Radha. I just wanted to, before just moving on from the tour, to give you a chance to hear a bit more about what went down and some of the stories beyond just playing shows, because it's a journey, these things. And I think sometimes it's fun and it's always useful to hear the stories of other people's journeys. In this podcast, we do mention that the East Forest retreat in Utah in the fall, October 1 through 4, it's now open. So you can check it out at eastforest.org/retreat. And Esalen Retreat still has a couple spots, and that's in, I believe, the end of May. That's all on my website if you want to check it out. And I'll be playing at the Tree Fort Music Fest at the third week of March here in Boise, Idaho. And that also includes a set at Yoga Fort on the Sunday. So I'm excited about those sets at Tree Fort because they're going to be ceremony sets. And I'm kind of getting a space, my own space to do this in. It's got a space called LED, which should be pretty special. Friday and Saturday nights at 10:30 p.m. Other than that, more to come, more news, but I feel like right now I should tell you all about the tour, but that would be redundant because we're going to do it right now. So let's get into this. This is Marissa Radha Wepner and myself giving you the story behind the story of Australia and New Zealand. All right. Sitting here with Marissa Radha Wepner, and we wanted to, while our brains are still fresh with the jet lag, while it's still running through our veins, to go through just what it was like this whole Australia tour. I also went to New Zealand, but the actual music was in Australia. And it was kind of a 3-week trip overall. So naturally, for at least us in our Northern Hemisphere, Western lives, it was unique in lots of ways and was actually quite a special experience, not just like going to another place and performing. So we thought it might be fun to kind of, before we forget, dive into some of those things that happened and things. How's the jet lag been for you?
I would say this has been one of my mildest jet lags coming home. And going there was one of my most pleasurable jet lag experiences because I could get up really early in the morning and feel quite set. It's a weird thing where Australia, New Zealand is a day ahead and 6 hours behind.
Yeah,
Boise.
So it basically was like 6 hours behind.
Right, but you're a day ahead.
So it's like when you go to Hawaii, it's 3 or 4 hours difference for us in the Mountain Time, Pacific Time. It just, but you cross that date line. So it did make it very confusing to try to communicate and figure out when we're supposed to do certain things. I need to have a call Wednesday, your time, Tuesday, my time. But I tried to tell people, look, it's just pretend it's 6 hours apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although there's even stranger things in Australia. Like when we went from Sydney to Brisbane.
The 30-minute difference.
It was an hour.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's just directly north. And the time zone changed because one of them doesn't follow daylight savings time.
That's true. We flew into the Gold Coast, and you're like, all right, we went an hour back, and we were for a minute, but then we
drove north into the other
anymore.
state 2 hours, and it went back to the other time. So I had to ask somebody, I was like, I don't understand why the time keeps changing, and I'm just going north and south.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a moment where I was like, I don't know how that much time just went by.
They're the Arizona of, I think parts of Arizona don't do it.
I thought that you told me one spot was 30 minutes, though. Was that Adelaide?
Yeah, as we went down south, exactly. And that was a bit of a west to east maneuver. So to me, that made a little sense. You don't see that very often, a 30-minute change. But you're right. So they have time zones, which it's one of the first fun facts of Australia. And in the same thinking, like Australia and Arizona. Like Arizona, I'm assuming doesn't want to do the daylight saving time because it's sunny and warm and so forth. And so I'm guessing they were just like, we don't want to deal because it's kind of like not that big a deal for us. And as we noticed, as you went north there of Sydney, it got kind of tropically and humid.
It felt like Costa Rica to me. It was great. It really reminded me of the Pacific coast of Costa Rica when we were in Byron Bay, and particularly Noosa, which is even a little bit further north of there. It was awesome. It felt really good, but I like that kind of weather.
So we might have been there at a particularly unique time because, so as we all know, the fires were happening, right? And that was obviously something I spoke to, and it was on our minds and in the consciousness. It's like, wow, we're going into this, and that's obviously is connected to why we're going. We left on a Tuesday, we land on a Thursday.
Yeah, you lose a day.
Right, which is another wonderful thing about how time becomes this malleable thing. But the moment we arrived in Sydney, we had one night there off, so to speak, and then we went to New Zealand. And on that night, it was like torrential rain, like biblical rains that apparently went on for 2 or 3 days, flooding.
Yeah, they call them cyclones. They're hurricanes. Was out there in the Tasman Sea, and it brought a ton of rain.
But not just a ton of rain. I mean, people were saying it hadn't really rained in 3 years.
They said something like it was the most rain they'd had in 4 years in 3 days.
Yeah, because when we went to the airport in the morning, I had to it was one of those ridiculous things where the key to the Airbnb was like across the street on a bike lock. You know what I mean? It was it was on the street outside a deli because it's some high rise. Anyway, it was raining so hard. Just doing that, it was as if I was standing in a shower. I was completely drenched, all of my clothes, as we're heading to the airport, which is a wonderful feeling.
It's like that time you spilled the water on your pants right when we were about to take off.
For China. It's like, all right, here's this 13-hour flight, and I spilled an entire, all of my underwear was wet. It looked like I wet my pants.
You dried out, though, with this one pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But the rain came, and it was beautiful. We had that one night in Sydney, and we stayed in the central business district, and it was great. We got to
CBD,
walk
as they call it.
CBD.
And I kept thinking that meant
Where's
like
the CBD?
it was weed friendly or something.
No,
it's
not
that's
the case.
Central. Yeah.
It was cool to see the Sydney Opera House.
Yeah, but I just want to go back and say that those rains put out the fires.
They did.
Which was a miracle for the country. And so we went away for a week, and by the time we came back,
it was all clear.
Everyone was in a good mood. There was no smoke in the air. There was a little bit in Adelaide, but that was 3 weeks later. And everything was completely lush and green and going nuts because it had just been watered and it had a week to kind of soak it all in and start growing. So everywhere we went was like amazing weather. It was hot a lot of places, but green.
Yeah.
So green. And that's what felt so tropical at times.
Yeah, it was like the fires hadn't even happened. It wasn't spoken to very much. We would see like on some restaurants, or we would go to like little posters or flyers like fundraising for the firefighters or for different organizations or wildlife organizations. We would see that, but it wasn't a thing.
I think in the big cities, like, Sydney, Melbourne, I heard it was more anyway down there in the southeast. And I remember they spoke a lot about in Adelaide because, some folks died, as our Uber driver told us, and they lost 90 homes in one part of the hills.
Yes, they did tell us that.
And up north in Doonan, they were telling us about how, they were they're ready to go for 3 nights. And like any moment, it's coming towards us, we got to go. It just happened to shift. But I don't want to diminish what happened there. Nonetheless, it was just remarkable what we were expecting, and then what happened with like biblical style rains, and then how that kind of set the stage for our journey. Because you and I talked about, look, we might likely have to shift plans, maybe cancel a show, and we guys to be ready just to be flexible like that.
And be ready for all that smoke. We've experienced that here in Idaho when there was big fires in Oregon and California and
2 years
Idaho,
ago,
and it was horrible.
Absolutely terrible. That was the summer 2 years ago here, where everywhere we went, it was just ridiculous, Beijing times 10. When we were in San Jose, remember that? That was the worst, the San Francisco area. Steve-O's calling me. Need to talk
Steve-O.
studio stuff. And then was here, And that was also the time in Oregon where
the Eclipse Festival.
But
it was terrible.
The Eagle Creek fire in the Columbia River Gorge, that's a rainforest. The idea of that burning was unheard of. So we did experience some terrible smoke, and I was expecting that. We brought masks. This is before coronavirus. We brought masks.
Yes.
That's a whole other thing that was going on while we were down there. And God knows where that'll be by the time this comes out, but it's like a daily shift.
It's true. But we were very fortunate traveling. It was easy. The weather certainly worked in our favor. I felt like we were blessed by the weather gods.
It was good. Yeah.
When we got to New Zealand, because of the rain that had came over in Australia, they had gotten also a lot in New Zealand. There was a big flood and areas washed out and closed there too.
Right.
But what was I going to say?
Well, I just wanted... Go ahead.
I was just going to say the weather in New Zealand was perfect.
It was, yeah. New Zealand was great. But, you know, what was interesting about going down to Australia was that, you know, when we talked about going, you had that gig to teach, and that kind of spurred the idea to even go at all. And then we put some dates together. And at the end of the day, it's a guessing game of like, I mean, will anybody even show up?
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, I've never been there in my life. And I know there's a couple people, I can see stats of where people listen, but you have no sense of like their engagement or if they want to like pay a ticket. And
do they care? Will they come?
Will they show up? Yeah. And they showed up.
They did. In great numbers for you. It was such a beautiful...
sold out the whole tour.
It was so great. They were so happy to have you there. We heard really comically a couple of times that some people were even surprised that you were actually playing. They thought they were buying a ticket to an East Forest music listening party, maybe?
Yeah, several people, and this confuses me, what in the languaging... They thought basically I had hired a guy, to play my music like a DJ, take money.
Isn't that what you do anyway?
And I was like, well, this maybe is a brilliant idea, but I don't think I didn't see how that could fly.
So they were so happy that you were there. My teaching too, I've never been to Australia, and they didn't know me from Adam, and I was very happy with the turnout of students that I had at Innerspace. Everyone there was so welcoming and open-hearted, open-minded.
Yeah, we had no issues with people. Everyone was super great, and all of our hosts were really great.
Yeah, thanks to Cara at Innerspace. She was a great help, for sure, especially allowing us to go over to New Zealand. She held on to 8 pieces of our luggage.
Yes, we had 8. 4 major pieces and 4 minor pieces. Well, they're all important, but... yeah, and so it was really heartwarming to have people show up, and in some ways, I don't know if it was a bottleneck effect of not having been there or something, or that there's a sense like, oh, you don't live here, so we want to come, but it made me definitely want to go back, and it made me realize all the pockets of community that can exist around the world. And look, no doubt, it's a ton of work to travel this far, and the logistics of it alone, and shout out to Isabel
your management team.
For organizing this whole tour. It's a lot. And if it wasn't for her help and all the people who said yes to hosting us and then people showing up, it just flat out wouldn't make sense. It really wouldn't. And because it takes a toll on your body, right? I mean, I always had a mysterious headache. I was bitten by a venomous beast.
Yeah, on Valentine's Day, when we got back to Sydney after our time in New Zealand, we were going on a beautiful afternoon walk through the Wendy's Secret Garden or something like that. Yeah,
we were in the North Harbor, so it's like right over the bridge. It's a beautiful neighborhood.
McMahon's.
Yeah, they always pronounce it. Everything we pronounced was wrong. We also learned everything.
We were the king and queen of mispronouncing.
McMahon's Point. McMahon's.
We were walking through this garden. We were having a beautiful time walking along the water there and in this gorgeous garden. And all
it was kind of foresty. It was like wood chips. It wasn't like a pavement.
Well, there's that huge tree, too.
Yeah, which is probably just an ecosystem turkeys. Of death. Yeah.
And I was drawn to the tree, and you came back there behind me, and then we walked out, and then not 20 seconds later, you got bit on your toe.
I was foolishly wearing flip-flops. That was the last day I did that, except for a couple more times I did up in the beaches. But, I mean, it was like anywhere we went, there was a huge disparity of going to New Zealand where they have just about nothing to worry about. right? They don't have
poisonous things.
They don't have much. They don't even have that many animals going around.
They have kiwis.
And then you go to Australia, and it's like everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard things like, we were at a venue once, and I heard, like, as I'm setting up, someone's like, "Oh, we got a snake out here. It's a white one. You got to come deal with it." I'm just like, "Oh my god!" Or I saw some spiders that were like the gnarliest, craziest looking spiders I've ever seen. And then, anyway, we were sitting there, and I got stung by something on my toe. It felt kind of like a bee sting, like a big, sharp, ouch. And I went down to shake it off, and there was nothing to see anymore. And quickly, it was like this venomous feeling, like a basketball size of pain on my foot.
But it didn't show anything. But you could barely walk on your foot.
It really hurt.
Said maybe it was an ant bite. I was trying to dissuade you from thinking it was a spider by continually telling you it was an ant. That was my tactic.
Yeah.
Krishna does not like spiders.
Well, you know what? I like spiders. They scare me, though.
Yes.
I'm trying to change my story with it and the medicine they bring. And so I had this pain, and the pain went away with some ice after a few hours, but quickly a headache and this neck pain set in that never went away the whole trip.
He had it the entire time.
Just this persistent nagging headache. Of course, I'm thinking I'm in serious trouble.
He does those internet searches that give you the clue that you're going to have meningitis.
You're dead. Yeah, you're going to die.
Lyme's disease or just some kind of incurable thing that's terrible, and then it makes the headache worse, and then you get more panicked, and then it's a beautiful spiral.
Well, it was something we wrestled with going to a doctor. Eventually I did, just to be like, hey, is there anything like in Australia that if I go home, no one there is going to know about it? You're like, oh, you got bit by the crikey Mikey,
And it always does that.
A Barbie with a barb, and I was hoping they'd say that, and they're like, all you have to do is eat these 3 red berries, but they were like, no, you have a headache.
A muscle tension headache.
Yeah, I was like, no shit. It's like, but why?
But she checked you for all the nerve damage and nerve pain and all the symptoms and things, and it's kind of anticlimactic when you go to a doctor and you want the big diagnosis, even though you don't want the big diagnosis. And
I wanted an insect. They'd say like, well, that's a bull ant, and it does. Yeah, it'll go away.
It could have quite possibly been a bull ant.
Yeah. Yeah, and your theory was that my head and neck hurt because I was driving on the left and everything was opposite, which now that I'm back, there's some credence to that because...
Well, when we went to the doctor and she said it's just muscle, and I'm like, well, what could be causing this muscle pain? It happened when we got back from New Zealand and you had started to drive on the left, which, to rewind, was highly stressful for you too. The first moment of that happening, you're also like, we can't cancel everything. I will not drive.
Let's back up. I assumed there were 2 times we had to rent a car. And one of them is in New Zealand to get around, and one of them was as part of the tour. So it's like we had to do it to get to the gigs. Had to do it. And I thought, I knew obviously you drive on the left, which I thought it's going to be weird, and I've asked friends, but that's it. You just drive on the left. Mm-hmm. What I did not anticipate, everything in the car is different, except for the gas pedal and the brake. I kept, for instance, turning on my turn signal and my windshield wipers would turn on because they're flip-flopped. And of course the mirrors are flip-flopped. It's in the left and your brain goes to the right. And my spatial relationship of where the ends of a car are so ingrained in me from being on the other side. They're now all just gone. And it was like I was trying to learn how to drive a car for the first time. But we're in New Zealand where the roads are like the width of a tiny car and they're windy. It's nighttime, it's raining, and he'd been flying for 3 days. And there's a missing day.
Yeah, he was not happy. It was a micro breakdown moment.
I had a little panic attack.
Yeah, he's like, we're not doing this.
As soon as we pulled the car out of the parking lot spot, and then you go to the gate where it exits, I went to the gate, and it's not moving. I'm like, why is the gate not moving? And I'm like, oh, because I'm on the wrong side of the road. Immediately, I screwed it up.
But that's normal. It was just a habit.
Well, my point is it was highly stressful. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that didn't help everything in my body. And driving it had crappy headlights, like this shitty headlight that pointed like down. Yes. So you couldn't really see it. It was tough. It was scary getting to the. We just only had to drive like 15 minutes to this Airbnb, but we hadn't been. when you arrive in a new country and it's dark, you're just kind of like, well, I know I'm in somewhere new, but I'm just trying to figure out where the hell I am.
Yeah.
We
He was not happy. He was not having it. He was like, no. We slept on it. He looked at the driving book. He woke up feeling a little bit better. And I said, you're going to learn, you're going to create new neural pathways.
It was scary.
It's going to be great.
Yeah.
You can do this. You can do this.
It was scary. It was hard. It was actually hard. But so anyway, fast forwarding as I started to get a little bit used to it. Mm-hmm. And we got to Australia, the roads were a little wider. When we got back, like we've been back now 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to tell you right now in this moment. I don't know if I fully explained this to you. I'm having trouble.
Well, you keep turning on the windshield wipers.
And last night,
yes.
I just drove 7 hours yesterday. I actually had to multiple times. I was passing or something, and I'm like, wait a minute. Am I supposed to be on the left or the right to pass? I don't freaking remember.
You have to think really hard because
I really couldn't remember.
It's a matter of life and death. It's an important decision. So you can't just like
you
kind
overthink
of casually do it. You overthink it.
I'm still having trouble though.
Yeah.
I drove on the wrong side of the street here the other day in the neighborhood,
You'll
mind
get
you.
it back. You'll get it back, babe.
It's a really interesting brain thing.
Yeah.
How, in just 2 weeks I was shifting and I come back here. I've been doing this for decades and now I'm shifting again. So that was a surprise in its stress. But I feel like, well, if we have to do it, I can do it. I can do it.
And you did do it. And you successfully did it. There were no accidents. There were no dings. There was no problems.
God bless.
It was internally stressful, but you championed up and you powered through it. And you had a raging headache the whole time. I think it might have been from the driving.
Yeah,
Perhaps.
maybe. So maybe. I mean, I definitely was bitten by something, but it's possible it was not related to what came on. Who knows? But anyway, that kind of physical issues, when you go so far, sometimes your body psychosomatically even, things come up. And it's a big deal to be hopping over there. It's big enough just to play a gig in town, let alone scoot over one state. But
and we did some of the hardest things ever where it was wake up at 3:45 in the morning and catch a flight and fly to a new town and set up and do a gig and
that
sleep
night.
For a few hours.
And then do it again. Another
and then
flight.
wake up at 4 a.m. and catch another 6 a.m. flight.
Yeah.
That's very difficult.
Yeah.
And maybe there's other pro musicians out there who do that kind of stuff all the time.
Well, you maybe have a little more support.
A private jet or something.
And we were dealing with I got to have a little non-shout out to Virgin Australia because that first flight we took, I've never been on. It was like they were German. I've taken German flights and they're strict with weight. They weighed everything.
There was one
carry-ons.
We had a hater lady stewardess pick us out in line even while we were waiting to get checked in, and she came up to us and said, "Are your carry-ons the right size?" And we're like, "Oh yes, they are."
I said, "Believe me, I've read every."
Shout out to Krishna. He spent the entire month of January. He spent, let's say,
a couple weeks.
I would say half of December and the entire month of January planning our luggage packing equipment situation and
the logistics of taking this gear there. How do we set it up? How do we get it around? How do we get it on the flights? How do we get it on the cars?
Well, mostly too because of Virgin Atlantic's strict weight policies.
You have to work off the most restrictive of all the different things you're going to do.
Yeah, and so the whole month of January, every day he would say to me, "When are you going to pack?"
Yeah, because I needed to weigh it.
And I would say, "I'll get to it soon. I'll get to it soon."
I needed to weigh it.
"When are you going to pack?" "I'll get to it soon." And we needed it that way because we had the very first flight, the stewardess pick us out, and she was going to weigh our luggage and make sure it wasn't over. And if it was, we'd have to check it and pay a lot of money.
Well, not only, that wasn't even the issue. The things we're carrying on are fragile. They can't be checked.
Right.
That's why. It's sort of like we're stuck. We're screwed. They're not packed in a way that they can be checked. They're just sort of like packed so we can carry them on, and it's lightweight, and they won't get lost and damaged. And so, it was sort of, that was Maharaji in drag too, because it's like, here it is. And after that, of course, they were super cool. No one gave a shit what we brought. Matter of fact, it was the opposite. The last one, you used to pay all this money, for the bags there. It's like, if you do it at the airport, it's even more. It's like $100 a bag. And I went to the last lady, that last flight we had, and I said, "Hey, blah, blah, blah. It's not working on the screen." She says, "Oh, well, it looks like you have 8 bags included for free or something." And I'm like, "That's not true, but that's like Very generous of you.
It was the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah. Well, aside from all boring things like that, what came up for you as far as, what did it feel like? Or did it feel like anything different for you to be down there? I know it's very much a beach culture, and you grew up on the beach. I'm sure that felt like home, but I felt that. It was kind of a relaxed, beachy vibe in the whole country.
Especially that weekend we spent in Sydney, the first weekend there with the different power livings in
Shout out to Jordan for
Bondi.
all the power living events.
Bondi Beach and Manly Beach and Neutral Bay, all those different spots. I love the beach vibe culture because, like you just said, that's how I grew up. I'm Daytona Beach, born and raised through the 80s and 90s. And so it felt really good. I've been landlocked in Idaho for the past 10 years. And so that was a sweet surprise. And going to New Zealand, though, that was a whole other different thing where the nature was just so stunning and gorgeous and epic. And there, too, the people were so kind. It's funny, they speak a version of English, but we had a hard time understanding a lot of people. Like Krishna said, we mispronounced most things as well and called ourselves out as Americans through the way that we spoke.
I'm sure my lazy, when I get this kind of lazy and casual, someone with a different accent, it's like, what the hell is he saying? I definitely had to tune my ear a lot just to like understand a waiter.
Yeah, there were moments where someone was speaking English and I would look at Krishna and I'm like, I don't know what he's saying at all.
Oh yeah, plenty of times someone said a phrase to me and I would just like say thank you. And they might have been, there wasn't the appropriate response, but I just touched my heart, nod my head. Like,
or we're thinking words mean different things. Like our very first morning in Queenstown, we were at that great little coffee shop restaurant that had the portrait of
Bill Murray.
Bill Murray above the fireplace, and you're like, I think a fluffy is a marshmallow.
Yeah, because they offer a fluffy as part of a coffee. I was like, I think that's a great
like
term.
Kids fluffy for $1 or something like that. Or and so you asked the guy when you went back up to get more coffee
because they had marshmallows sitting
on
there.
the counter. Yeah. And then you asked about what did you say to the guy?
I said, is this a fluffy? Can I get a fluffy? He's like, that? No. I said, what's that? He says, it's a marshmallow. He says, where have you been hiding? It's like,
a fluffy is a kid's drink, is what he
apparently
said.
so.
So we were making up new words.
But for me now, it's a marshmallow.
Yeah, marshmallows will always be fluffies.
Yeah.
And we did get a fluffy in your coffee, and there were fluffies at
dirty.
Most coffee counters.
Definitely sounds like something we shouldn't, getting a fluffy in your coffee doesn't sound appropriate.
Hey, you're the one that wanted one.
I did. I'll stand by that, but nonetheless, it sounds salacious.
The food was fantastic, but it was incredibly overpriced. There was the flight that we were taking from Sydney to New Zealand. We were trying to get breakfast, and avocado toast, a piece of sourdough with a quarter of an avocado on it, was $23.
I think it was more.
Well, it was more if you wanted an egg, which was like $6.
To be fair, their tax is included in that price, the GST.
No, it's not.
It is. I think it is, and the tip is included.
The tip is included, so it's about a 20% discount, but still that's a lot.
Oh, it's crazy. And they, folks we talked to, they're like, yeah, food's crazy. It's expensive. And we're trying to wrap our head around, like, is 40 Australians feel like 40 to them, or does it feel like what it feels like to us, which is more like, I don't know, 28 or 25, given the current rate? Said, well, maybe it feels like less to them. And they were saying, no, it feels like a lot. But a waiter there can get like $35 an hour.
Yeah, and you don't tip. So again, that 20%.
We can. Sometimes I would. But they certainly weren't expecting it, I noticed.
Yeah.
That sometimes there wasn't an option to if I paid with a card.
Right. It would just go.
There was no way to do it. Yeah.
But food was so good.
Yeah.
We had lots of great meals.
Lots of great meals. And we did a lot of like merch, and I didn't bring enough vinyl, and I brought too many CDs, and just like here, they're not as into the CDs, which makes sense. They just don't know how to play them. Not how. They know how.
They don't have anything to play them on.
Right. But
people now have their record players, and you sold out of your vinyl in the first 3 shows, and then we were stuck with all those CDs. We maybe sold a total, I'm going to guess, less than 10.
We weren't able to take credit cards, really, because Square doesn't work overseas. So you came up with a good hack with PayPal. but
Yeah.
still it was a little bit cumbersome. So I just appreciate everyone who did buy merch because our margins on this tour were tight, and that everything helped. And yeah, it's inspired me to think about going to other parts of the world.
Where would you like to go next?
Well, don't hold me to it, audience, but I mean, I want to go everywhere. But I'm thinking the UK because I've played in Europe 4 times as East Forest, but it's been a while. And when I did do it, it was really just like gum and duct tape holding the tour together, so to speak. I mean, it was really, I just kind of anywhere I could find a gig. This is a long time ago. I would drive like 1,000 kilometers just to play in this little bar in southern France, and then I'd cruise up to Amsterdam in a car. So I'd like to do that in a more healthier fashion. But I never went to the UK to play. And according to the stats that I was judging going to Australia by, the same or similar or better even, we have friends and community in the United Kingdom. And so, and just feels right. You know, we just did the thing with Nick Mulvey, and he feels like a brother already. And I'm like, oh, I vibe his music. They vibe his music.
I have a feeling they would love to see you in the UK.
Well, I'd love to go.
Yeah.
And Ireland, too. And
Yeah.
Scotland.
Let's do all of those together.
Excuse my ignorance, as I believe Scotland are part of it. I don't know.
We just did our 23andMe while we were on our trip, too. We got our results while we were in New Zealand. And I'm mostly British and Irish.
So they should pay for you to go. It's like your
I'm returning
Israel
home.
trip where, yeah. Yeah, so that's inspiring me. I've always wanted to go to Japan as well to play because there's acts that are similar to myself that are welcome there. And I've just felt intuitively there's family there musically and artistically. I mean, frankly, we'll go anywhere where I feel like there's a good invitation and it's needed. It always feels like an act of service. But some places like, hey, I'd love to do a tour of Africa, but nobody's calling from
That would be
Ghana to say we need you.
to put together. And if you're listening and you are in one of those spots and you're like, well, I've got a spot East Forest could play in. Some of the venues that we played in Australia were from folks that just are fans and have studios, and they reached out. We did a lot through the Power Living Network because we connected to Duncan and then Jordan, and he did such a good job. But like I said, some of those other spots, like our friends now in Doonan, Christy and
the brother who got the snake.
Craig, I want to say.
Well, I know his soul by looking at his
They
eyes.
reached out and just through Instagram, and we took our day off and went to their spot, and it was great.
Yeah, there was some amazing hospitality there.
One of
Shambhala
our favorite
Farms.
places for sure.
Yeah, really nice stay there and a beautiful gig. Several of the gigs were quite hot. And so for our Australian friends who did come and you're in a hot gig, I want to apologize. There's nothing I could do about it. But I guess now that I know it can get quite hot, we'll certainly do our best to bring some air conditioning. But I felt like people there are like, well, this is how it is. You know, it can get really, really, really hot in some of those places.
Well, really hot with packed bodies in a room, and it's humid.
For me as a performer, I'm assuming the heat I'm experiencing is even more. And I had a couple moments where I struggled quite a bit. One night where I was feeling a little faint, and I was like looking at the keys and doing the whole thing and looping something, and I just felt like it was sort of like driving on the right and the left. I forgot, sort of like what's a C? What's a G minor?
Oh,
That kind of thing.
Wow.
And it was like just a second of like, how does this work?
because you were so hot.
It just my brain was starting to shut down, and I had to just push through that. But
The next day, when we were in Doonan, you had your magical moment right at the end of the show when you had forgotten to plug in your computer, which is like
oh, that was amazing.
probably for you one of the biggest no-no, like amateur moves, and you couldn't believe that you had done that.
Well, yeah, we were having some computer issues. I don't want to get too deep in the rabbit hole and the boringness of this, but basically, I use a computer sort of like a mixer, and it's important because if it's not on, all the audio is going through it, right?
Yeah.
And computers are computers these days. There's a mystery inside that box. And I got a new computer, a new used computer. Used, I won't even go into the reasons why. I just take my word that it had to be used to work with the things and the things and the things. And I do this as a form of maintenance, like getting, upgrading equipment, even if it's not broken, so to
Yeah,
speak.
you did this in December so that you'd be
I
ready
do it
for this
all
tour.
the time. Every year I'm buying computers, and it feels kind of terrible, but it's like Apple has me by the neck, and they like to step on it from time to time. And I have two that I travel with, and one that I use in the live set. And I bought this just trying to do due diligence, and I was having trouble. It was giving like an audio glitch sound, and I spent many, many, many hours trying to figure out why and troubleshooting. And it's an indiscriminate sound, so it wasn't like I just easily could replicate it. Talking to Steve-O, thanks Steve-O, and talking to Ed over at 1201 in Portland, and talking to Apple and talking to other friends. And I thought I'd maybe found a solution, and then we went, and of the 8 shows, I think 5 or 6 of them,
it had the sound.
it made the glitchy thing, which is stressful and not what I want. So I went back to Apple right after I got back a couple days ago, and the guy comes up to at the Genius Bar, and I just laid into him. I was like, before you speak, and I gave him the preamble, sort of like setting down, like a lawyer setting down a binder or two of like research, and the person is like, I'm not even going to try and argue this. Like I was talking about things I don't even think he understood. He immediately got his supervisor, and the supervisor was just like, yeah, so where's the credit card? We'll return it for you. And they returned it. I still have to figure out what to do, how to...
But in Dunin, what happened?
Oh, so in Dunin, I had pulled out my other computer to have 2 like ready to go.
As a backup.
Yeah, and that one was plugged in and it was charging. And then we started the show, and I hadn't put the charger back onto my other performance computer. So it's just operating on the battery, which I didn't know. Which amazingly, it worked fine. But we got through the entire set, maybe an hour and a half. And at the very end of the set, I said to the room, like the very end, boom, 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 boom. We're here, we're there. Can we feel it? Okay. Now let's all inhale through our nose for one final collective Om. We're going to breathe in, and I go, and the sound cut out. Like all the sound, like my mic went dead, and there's no more sound. And I was like, what the hell happened? And I looked, I was like, oh my God. The computer's battery ran out. It wasn't plugged in. It went dead in that moment, like at the final Om. So, of course, we had to do the final Om acoustically, which is fine, if not appropriate. But I found that to be an interesting form of synchronicity, of kind of like there's a humor to it, of the universe being like kind of, it said 3 things simultaneously, which is a perfect manifestation of what it means to be alive. Like it said, you're like, don't like this problem that you're like giving too much power. I'm kind of playing with you by showing you a failure. But then it's happening at a moment that's actually like artistic and fun and beautiful. So it's at like a good moment. It actually made things more interesting. Mm-hmm. And then on top of all of that, it's just like, well, the timing of it is the synchronicity itself, right? I mean, if it happened in the middle of the set, it would have been... quote unquote worse, but
it would
at the
have
same
killed
time,
the vibe.
But the time it had it had more meaning.
Yes.
Which made it a louder message.
Yes.
A louder message of sort of saying, hey, you're being held, but you're not a baby. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. You could laugh at it. It was a bit comical for you, which was a blessing.
Absolutely. I mean, in the moment, I really thought it was stunning in a good way.
Yeah.
Because it was at the end, and I'm not sure the audience understood what was going on, but to me it had a lot of meaning. Yeah, so that happened. I'm trying to think if there are any other like occurrences of special, like, I mean, certainly there were down moments and high moments, but as there are on tour with that long. And we were on that beach one time, and we were going to be speaking of venomous things, and it was really, really hot. And we were like, there's only one bit of shade under these trees.
We were at the beach at Byron Bay, and we had been there at the beach the day before, and we walked out onto the beach, and you had been like, we need shade. And I turn and I look over my shoulder, I'm like, there are free umbrellas right there. It was like a line of free umbrellas that
As
you could
gifts, yeah.
that you could just give a donation and take an umbrella, which is great. So the next day we're like, let's go back to the beach with the free umbrellas.
And there weren't any.
We went back, and they must have moved it to a different beach. Maybe that
They just weren't
free
there.
umbrella service gets rotated.
Yeah, we only had an hour, and we wanted to get in the water before the show.
The water was perfect.
Yeah, and So anyway, the only place to sit in the shade was under these trees, and we went under the trees, and I'm just like, I don't know. This is feeling like we shouldn't be under these trees. I was nervous. The bite thing. Maybe this is why I got bitten. It gave me a premonition of like, I don't just sit anywhere and like, no, I mean like there.
Oh,
my body was like, no, this we shouldn't be here.
Primal body said no.
Got to go out to the sun. So we go out to the sun, and we're sitting on the beach. Where I turn around, there's these signs that you couldn't see. It's like warning, like, you know,
Poisonous
snakes. Yeah, like all through those trees and bushes. Like, don't sit here, dummy. There's a bunch of snakes. I'm like, well, I'm not used to that. I'm used to rattlesnakes. That's about it.
That same area too. We stayed in Bangalow, and we would drive back and forth.
Bungalow?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Bangalow Bay. Bangalow.
Yeah. Sounds
But
again
when we were
inappropriate.
driving, there were those great big, you know, the big signs that are on the side of the road when there's construction, and they're maybe like 6 feet by 6 feet, and they flash and they change.
They have a generator.
The phrase. And so the phrase would say, watch out. And then the next phrase would come, koala's about. Watch out. Koala's about.
Yeah.
Watch out.
Which made me think of like zombie koalas, which we didn't see a koala at that point, and we're just like, it made like, look over your shoulder. Watch out. This koala's about. But we did, speaking of wildlife.
Yes.
But before we left, we were like, we really would like to see some stuff. And we were looking around. We did see things, amazing bird sounds. I got some amazing field recordings while I was there. To me, it was just like a completely different landscape of sound.
Yeah, the birds were so wonderful. And
birds,
the kookaburra.
All sorts of things. But we really wanted to see some of the big five. What are the big five?
I would say
kangaroos,
koalas, wallabies, kookaburras, crocodiles.
I think that's it.
And maybe wombats are on there, but I'm not sure.
Nah, they're a sixth. They're not. They didn't make the big five. But we wanted to see those or some of them. And someone told us, our hosts in Adelaide, we had a great show, and we had 2 days off. Their only days off at the end there, and they said there's a wildlife park refuge out in the hills. What was it called?
The Cleveland.
Yeah,
Cleveland Wildlife Conservatory.
Yeah, and it was amazing because it's basically like there are no fences it's basically this big open spaces, and it's so large and different areas that you just feel like you're kind of on a sort of a gentle hike.
Yeah, so think like a park. You're basically in an open park.
But not that groomed.
No, not that groomed.
So it felt cool.
And there were fences between separate zones. But
huge zones.
You'd walk into this zone and you're in, again, think like a park, and you look over and you say, oh, I think there's a kangaroo right there.
Yeah, I see some wild animals over there.
And you walk up to the kangaroo.
And I'm waiting for them to freak out.
They just lay there on their sides casually.
They're totally lounging.
Like they're
and then
on
you
the
keep
beach.
getting closer and closer. You give them some food, and they're like...
or they didn't even open their mouth. They're like, we've had these pellets a gazillion times.
Oh, big surprise.
More
shitty pellets. But they let you pet them. They just chill. And we saw like little joeys in the pouches. And we saw koalas. And we saw
wallabies
all sorts
and
of
wombats,
things.
Tasmanian devil, all those poisonous snakes. Those are in the
places
glass.
Behind things. Yeah. But that was cool. It was a nice way to kind of end the trip, was to get to actually touch some wildlife.
Yeah,
like
and we could there wasn't really that many people there, and we just walked around for so long and just took our time. It didn't feel crowded, and we basically chilled with the kangaroos for hours, it seems.
Yeah.
You even saw some kangaroos getting at it.
Yeah. And then we were like, we left it closed. We were the last people there, and like there was no one there anymore. And we step outside of the gate, and there's another kangaroo. And I was like, wait a minute, this guy escaped?
He's like squatting.
And then I realized, no, this is a wild one, but he's also domesticated because I think he just lives here. Mm-hmm. And people come out, their leftover food, and they feed him. Mm-hmm. And there was another one, and they were just like more. I don't know if kangaroos are that docile generally. I imagine they're not. They're like deer probably. I don't know
either.
But they,
these all
when they get used to you, they certainly are.
Oh, and the dingoes, we saw those too.
Yeah, dingoes look a lot like Kaya, my dog. Mm-hmm. I think I've always thought she has some defiance in her.
She's got some dingo in her too.
Yeah,
and she's the alpha.
Yeah. So all in all, a really amazing trip. Probably start going back soon because it takes a while to put these things together. Thank you again to everybody who helped put it together, everyone on my team, but also, Tim and Isabel, but all the people who, again, said yes. And then most importantly, all you guys, if you were able to show up, for showing up.
Really sweet fans.
And to you.
Oh.
For all the help you did. You were a big part of all these, not just the ceremonies themselves that we did, which you were a big part of. I could not have done it by myself with all the gear and the moving and the support and the emotional support. And so thank you for
You're
doing
welcome. You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
It was a big trip.
It was a big trip, and it was a ton of work for both of us. I got to step in like full Radha karma yoga selfless service mode for over 2 weeks, and it was beautiful. And I love being able to add to the ceremony concert experience with the sense and the sound and the energy holding and crafting and containing so that you can do your magic. And every time it's so wonderful for me too. I get to hear it. I would say I've been a part of probably 90% of the ceremonies, and it doesn't get old. I just love it so much. And I love the effect that it has on people and the responses that they share afterwards. It's so moving. It's so powerful.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. That's true. Like sometimes I was telling you, I'll look out when I'm first starting and I'm giving people some preamble and introduction, and I can't read their faces and body language. And I get the vibe sometimes. The person who won't look at me, or the person, they're not looking at their phones, but it's that vibe. Kind of like, shut up.
No, they're not.
This is all in my head.
It is in your head.
I know it's my story, but all it takes is one bad student, so to speak, and the whole class is difficult. And there's like one guy who's like, the energy is just like,
but
it makes no logical sense.
It's just his resting meditation
I know.
face.
It's just like, we're starting an event they paid to go to and attend, and it's like, of course they want to be there.
Yes.
But I have to overcome that. And I see it in my mind, and I just kind of watch it. I don't identify with him. It's like, oh, there's that thought. Yeah. And I just continue with whatever's coming through. And that happens with music. That happens, and that's that Ram Dass idea of not turning it off, just kind of loving it. And saying, oh, there you are. All right. Hello. All right. We don't need that right now. It's all okay. But I say this because after the shows, we would be selling the merch and meeting folks and taking pictures and just talking and hearing from people's stories. And I was always, there was one particular show, I won't say which one, that I felt people weren't as connected, right? And I was like, well, I guess I don't know. Sometimes you win them, sometimes you don't. And I did my best. And then afterwards, if we just bailed, I'm like, let's get out of here, get some dinner, that would have been the story. And instead, maybe that night we heard the most engaged responses from people. Oh, I'm so happy that happened. I had this life-changing moment of,
people gave you sweet gifts that they brought.
We just had the birth of our daughter to the music,
So it was so profound. I think part of it is
giggle.
They don't quite know, too, maybe what to expect out of the experience. And the way that you lead it is so beautiful. And all the intention that's put into it is so thoughtful to go deep, and you guide them in just the right way. And then for them, especially those who are fans of your music, to have that moment where they get to sit so close and so intimately with you, watching you create it, is really powerful too. Because you doing that thing that you do when you're making music,
I think they were just hot.
So many parts of your brain are working at once. I'm blown away by it.
Oh, well, that's sweet. Well, the next ceremonies are Tree Fort Music Fest, March. Help me out. You're on. You help with this.
Tree Fort Music Fest in Boise, Idaho, March 25th through the 29th.
2020. And one of the dates is Sunday, and that's at Yoga Fort, which is part of Tree Fort. It's one of the sub forts that you lead. And
you're going to play for my class.
Right. I think it's like 1 p.m.
Something like that. It's for Yoga Fort, but you're playing for Tree Fort Music Fest too in their LED space, and it's
Friday and
great.
Saturday night.
It's a late night. It's like
10:30 p.m.
10:30 start time. And there's no one after you, and it's going to be a ceremony, concert, or whatever you want. Some new things.
It's going to be a deep dive for sure. And it's really fun inside this container of a festival because, I don't know, it's got a different energy that I really enjoy. It feels, at least it was last year. And so I'm really looking forward to having our little space that we create. So that's coming up. If you want to come to Boise, Idaho, it's a wonderful festival at the end of March here. Come join us.
Hey, should we say that other thing we're going to do in October?
Oh, yeah. And we just opened the signups for the East Forest Spirit Dive that Marissa Radha-Welpner will also be leading, as she has since the beginning.
You can just call me Radha.
Radha. But that's the Utah retreat, the Southern Utah retreat. It's kind of our flagship retreat that we kind of get to choose most of how it goes down. It's a wilderness and wellness retreat that we've been doing. This is the fifth. And it's quite intimate. And so if you are feeling that calling, I encourage you to sign up right away. The housing is quite limited. If you want to camp, it can get a bit chilly at night, but it's definitely campable. Then you're going to have more options of when you sign up. But we do cap it at a certain number because we like to go on hikes into these amazing canyons of the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. And we're restricted on how many people we can do that with. So it's organic food, yoga with Radha, meditation, music, wellness, celebration.
Talks, ecstatic dance, lots of connection.
And above all, the wilderness.
Yeah, the nature there is the medicine.
Yeah, and there's a couple spots as well currently left at the Esalen Institute in Big Sur, California. At the end of May, we'll be doing another retreat.
Dive.
Yeah, a little bit of a different character there. It's a little bit more of an exploration of sound and how music and sound takes us to the inner landscape through various mechanisms. And then they have the hot springs there. So it's quite restorative and rejuvenating. And you can check that out through eastforest.org/retreat.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks to all of Australia for your love and support. And what a treat for me to be on tour with you again.
Well, the honor is all mine. And we'll catch you soon. Thank you, Radha, for joining me, and thank you guys for listening. More to come this next week. I try to get these out on Tuesday, and I think this coming week is going to be Aubrey Marcus. He's got an amazing story to tell about his time in the darkness. He did a darkness retreat. If you don't know what that is, it's pretty exciting. Yeah, this song you're hearing in the background is called Highway 1, and it's from an album called Orbits. And Highway 1 is kind of like a rework of the original song Pacific Coast Highway, which is on my first album, The Education of the Individual Soul. So that's what that is. I'm working on a project I can't talk about yet, but I will hopefully soon as I feel like it's something I can talk about. That's so boring. It's like, okay. And I'm like, so I'm going to go work on that thing. And you're like, oh, sounds great, man. But it's exciting to me. I'm just saying that to be a bit of a tease. No, but I've been also recording piano music on this new Baldwin. Well, it's an old Baldwin. It's 102 years old. And I had the piano tech, Jared, was out here helping me work on it. We're just, it needs a lot of little loving to get it back into shape. But it's been exciting to get into that flow and have just a little bit of time to be in the studio in this new studio space in Boise. And just be doing the basics, piano, music. A lot of the songs I write start that way. Just if it works on piano, we can build it from there. So with that, folks, hey, you keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit. But if you do it with grace, please.